All right, welcome into Carps Corner. We've got Ohio State. We have Rutgers. 3:30 kick. Is it too much juice for the game? Maybe. Hopefully this game will be good. Not really. Hopefully it'll be good for a little bit. But you start looking at this game, Rutgers coming in. They're 3-1. Recently lost to Iowa, I believe 27-10. If you look at how they lost, wasn't due to their defense. It was due to their offense's lack of scoring and their inability to not turn the football over. 2 pick sixes for Iowa ultimately led to the demise of Rutgers. So let's take a look here at kind of what ultimately what to look at, what to kind of watch this game. Lathan Ransom sat out last week. Was a little nicked up. Josh Proctor played the whole game at free safety. And so is Lathan Ransom back. We saw him earlier when he came in against Notre Dame, played really well for Josh Proctor, played well last a couple weeks ago. He's a very sure tackler. He's done a tremendous job for Ohio State this season. So watching him, how will he respond as we kind of get into this Big Ten slate? Because I believe we have Michigan State the following week, get into a bye week. Before you know it, it'll be Halloween. It'll be Penn State weekend. And that should be the next big test for the Buckeyes because it doesn't look like Michigan State's going to provide a lot of resistance. So him coming back from injury. The young defensive backs, Jair Brown, J.K. Johnson, both played pretty well against Wisconsin. Now everybody knows they're young defensive backs that are on the field. And so you have to anticipate that people will begin to target and people begin to look at those guys. And I understand that Rutgers doesn't necessarily have the best passing attack, which we'll get into, but you have to think Greg Schiano is going to find a way to try to challenge young and inexperienced players on the perimeter. So the 2 young corners, I mentioned Jair Brown, J.K. Johnson, how are they ultimately going to respond now that they're both out there sitting in most likely their second games as a starter? Do we get Cam Brown back? That's a question. I don't know if he comes back. I don't think that he will this week, but you never know. It doesn't seem like it's trending that way with what Ryan has said. Do we get Denzel Burke back? That would be big. He had the cast on his hand. Is that something last week? Is that something you can cast up, you can play with? Obviously, he should be able to run, but how is it going to impact his coverage? And, could be a surprise for him to be back, but it would be a welcome addition as he would be the veteran presence out there on the field for the corners. And even though he's, a very young player, it would be a key to get him back on the field because it gives you depth. You need 3 guys. So if you can get Cam back, great. Hopefully Jordan Hancock will be back soon, and that'll kind of round out that defensive back room. But they need to have one of those guys ready to go simply to be able to give some relief. If not, you might have to bump out Tanner Mcallister or someone like that who plays in the nickel. And speaking of that, Tanner Mcallister is going to be huge this week because Rutgers, they do a lot of tricky things. They're going to bunch, they're going to move around. And so it's up to Tanner, who is going to be down there with the corners on one side or another to direct traffic, to babysit a little bit those young guys. And when there's formations and things you're unsure of, to ID and let them know what they ultimately need to do. And so Tanner, good player, obviously has made some great plays, but his mind and his understanding of the defense and his command is going to be critical this week, maybe even more so than normal. So we got that in there. Kyle McCord, when will he enter the game? I think this should be a blowout. How quickly does Ryan Day want to get him in there? What does it look like when he gets in? Does he get any run maybe with the first offensive line and first offense? Does Ryan leave those guys in for another series to have some overlap to let him kind of air it out a little bit? And then ultimately, how many balls does he throw? We haven't really seen him open up, his arm a lot when he's gotten in the game. And I know Ryan doesn't want to run it up, and I don't think he's going to want to run it up against Greg Schiano, but you have to be able to get him in there and ultimately see what he can do because the CJ Stroud era will come to an end, and you want to have a guy who has thrown 100 balls in a game before over the course of a season. So that would be big to get some of that work in this week if we can find a way to get that done. Sonny Styles, I believe, played like 8 to 10 snaps last week. Physically, obviously, he looks the part. I think he's still 17 years old. Huge, 6'4", 6'5", dude. Physically put together, 220, and can move. Do we get to see more of him? Do we continue to integrate him into this defense? He's a guy that he enrolled early. I don't think anybody anticipated him starting, but is he a guy that can start to get 20 plays a game? We'll find out. I think this week they're going to want to get him in there. And then also the other freshman I want to see, if they get him in there more, is Kaden Curry. and he's been getting in a little bit. They're pretty deep at the defensive line room, with the guys they have. You start looking around. But Kaden Curry is a football player. He gets in, he makes plays, gets sacks, does all of those things in a big way. And so I would like to see Kaden Curry get out there a little bit more. I think he's someone that could have a big impact down the road. And it's great to be able to get these guys in a little earlier than normal because it just gives them that confidence. They've been doing it in practice, and now you get them out there on the game field. And that's what's critical for the development. That's what happened last season, why the defense struggled so much. None of those guys got to play the year before because of the COVID year. So getting Kaden Curry in is only going to benefit this team down the road this year, but also down the road in the future when he becomes the guy as people begin to age out. So that's a big piece. So I'd like to see him get in the game a little bit, and hopefully Larry Johnson will continue to work him in to the rotation as well. We got the keys to the game, the three keys that I'll sit here and I always try to give you three little nuggets each week. Sometimes offense, defense, special team, maybe a couple offense, maybe involve the fans, for a night game to get them going. Pretty excited this week. It's a 3:30. It's the fifth home game in a row for Ohio State. I don't want to say there's fan fatigue, but you've had 3 of 4 night games. You've had a noon game. This is the first 3:30 game. So that's a little bit unique. It's a nice sweet spot because you've got some great games in the morning. You've got some great games in the evening. Get a little bit done in the morning, sit down and rest and relax for the night games. We've got a ton of crap personally as a family going on this weekend. So we'll get into that at the end about what could be going on there. But we've got a lot of stuff going on. It's a pretty big deal with this being 3:30. And so it's Rutgers. It's ABC, or it's Big Ten Network. This should be a good game, hopefully, for a series or two. But after that, they pull away. But the keys ultimately to the game. We'll start out with defense. Trick plays. If you look and you watch some of Rutgers games, which probably not a lot of you have watched many of them, Greg Schiano loves the trick plays. Special teams, offense, he's going to pull stuff out there. He had a guy laying down in the end zone last week at home to try to camouflage him in with the red there on the turf. I don't think the Big Ten appreciated that from what I've been told. I think that they may even have a phone call regarding, hey, there's trick plays and then there's the actual practice of deception. We're not going to endorse that. We're not going to do that. It'll be a penalty moving forward. So trick plays on special teams, throwbacks, fake punts, fake field goals, reverses on kickoff returns, reverses on punts. Greg will think up a lot of stuff, crazy formations just to force you to get lined up to it. And if you don't, ultimately then he'll be able to take advantage of it. Now, is he doing that against the starters? Sure. You start doing against like the second group and scoring that way. I don't think Ryan will take kindly to that. And I think he may try to score more points. And so it'll be a balance. But I know Ryan has a lot of respect for Greg and the help that he gave him. But the trick plays, however many of those happen and what ultimately comes of that, going to be interesting. So watch that. Like I said, the special teams of everything there on defense, a lot of screens, reverses. They're going to run some wildcat. I know we haven't seen that in a while. They'll run some wildcat with one of the running backs. Throw him in there, motion across, try to run it up in there. I don't know how successful any of those things will be, but just the trick plays, the throwbacks, flea flickers, anything out there, be wary of it. And when you have young corners like Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson out there, those are guys who haven't seen a lot of that. And so they call it eye control with what you're looking at. And you have to have great eye control to make sure that you are reading your keys and you don't get the shiny thing syndrome where you start looking at where the ball is going, potentially over here, and you'll lose focus on what you're supposed to look at. And with that, ultimately that causes big plays to happen because there's busts in coverage, there's busts in assignments. And so don't have shiny thing syndrome. Focus with eye control, critical for the defense and special teams this week. If you're contained means be the outside guy. There got to be 21 guys inside of you. That's how that works. And that will be tested this week. So all of those things, whether it's special teams, defense, whatever, got to be locked in for it. All right, now let's take a look at the offense. Keys on the offensive side of the ball. Keep the running game going. That is going to be crucial. Absolutely critical. If you saw what Ohio State did to Wisconsin last week, numbers aside, 200-yard backs, it was great. You've got to continue to mash up front. It wasn't the running back. We have 200-yard running backs. This means the running backs are good, but that's a testament to the offensive line and what they're able to do. So you're going to be very big there. That offensive line was playing well. They've gotten better. They've begun to mesh, and we've seen them grow each and every week. And so last week against a team who we thought was really stinking good up front, why? Because they've always been. Historically, that's what Rutgers has always been, or Wisconsin has always been good up front. Ohio State mashed them, did a great job, and you watch those holes open is big enough for me and my 4 kids to run through, and my wife, bring us all, and go pick up yards. Like I could have probably rushed for 100 yards last week, and I'm an old man. Those holes were great. So keep that offensive line going. Why is that important? When you look at Rutgers, they have the 9th best defense in the country. Now, look at that. They played Boston College. They played Wagner. They played Temple. Last week they played Iowa. Iowa, the best team of all of them, but their defense is flat out atrocious, or their offense is flat out atrocious, rather. So none of them have a great offense. And so with that, you got the number 9 defense in the country for Rutgers. They're allowing 56.5 yards per game on the ground. Now, that is where Ohio State's going to be challenged. I'm talking about wanting to run the football. You're facing a team who's really good on run defense. Now, that number might be a paper dragon, might be a cardboard number, not real because of the caliber of teams you play. This is obviously a level jump of what you're going to see. But Ohio State needs to continue to run the football. We know they can throw with C.J. Stroud. We're going to see them flip it all around, and that's always going to happen. But they've been averaging almost 220 yards now on the ground for the young Buckeyes, and that's big time. So you're facing a team that's only yielding about 56. You're rushing for about 220. You need to make sure, as Ryan Day, that you continue to lean in to those play calls that are going to be run calls. And, Ryan has talked about it before. You saw it against Michigan last year. They maybe hammer on the run too much, or maybe you got to get more diversity in your running game. Whatever it might be, sticking with the run is going to be critical because they need to develop it because you have to have it. I will say this all the time. Maybe you have to have it against team up north, maybe Penn State, but I know you will need it in the college football playoff. So you have to continue to grind at it. And you go against teams that, like I said, they're ranked high. Do I think Rutgers is the top 10 run defense in the country? No. But they still have the numbers that say they are. And so that'll be a little added motivation for these guys to come out and be able to play. And then lastly, also go for the defense. This is going to fall on the guys up front, Sawyer, Hall, JTT, Zach Harrison, all these guys up there, what they're able to do. Teron Vincent, pressuring the quarterback. Why is that important? Well, it's always important to pressure the quarterback. It impacts the offense, it impacts game flow. All of those things are true. What it also does as well is when you're playing a team like Rutgers, and they started off the season with Noah Ventrell playing, and then they played Gavin Winsat, and he's out there, and now you're on your 3rd quarterback, Evan Simon. So you've got 3 dudes. If you can get past him, let's see if those other guys are healthy. Let's see who else they have to play. And that'll be a really, really bad situation. I almost feel bad for Greg Schiano because this is a year I think they have a chance to win 7 games, make a bowl. And as my co-host on 97.1 The Fan points out, Brandon Beam, they get to earn their S. He calls them Rutgers. Until they beat Ohio State, 500 in the Big Ten or 500 total record, which would probably be the easiest of all of them. They're Rutgers to him. So they get a chance to earn their S. And so this is big. And they've got to find a way to ultimately win some games. But you don't want to be doing that by getting your quarterbacks destroyed and getting them beat up. But Ohio State needs to pressure them because Evan Simon does a little bit of everything. Now, a guy I want you to keep your eye on, some players to keep your eye on for Rutgers. Number 21, Johnny Langman. He is their tight end, H-back, does a lot of things, kind of a Swiss Army knife. They'll have him run some jet sweep stuff. They'll have him back there doing some stuff with the Wildcat. He's, big move guy blocker. He does some inline stuff. He He can go catch some balls. Like, he is the guy that Greg Schiano, like, he has carries. How many tight ends actually have carries? Greg Schiano wants to try to get him involved. They see value in what he can do because he is so versatile. So that'll be a little wrinkle for the defense, especially with how ultimately you need to be watching where those guys line up. And an interior guy like that can, like I said, go out for passes, get in the inline position on the line of scrimmage, can also run jets and all those things. It makes coverage tough sometimes, especially if you're trying to play man, and whether you banjo those guys off and pass them back before linebackers and between linebackers and maybe even a strong safety, or do you play zone, or do you lock it up and have the safety run with them? Like, there's a lot of different options that you can have, but communication is key and is paramount for that to occur. So watching Langman there on that. Some other guys, Aaron Cruikshank, wide receiver, not the biggest dude in the world, 5'10", about $175. You've heard that name before because he played at Wisconsin last year. So he's got a handful of catches, quick, small, shifty dude. Going to challenge the Buckeyes in space with tackling. We saw how that happened with Arkansas State. Hopefully they don't have that again, any missed tackles or any busted assignments there. And then Shannon Jones, bigger wide receiver, 6'2", about $185. And so he will be a little bit more the possession guy and can do some more things. That guy is that way as well. And then here's the thing with their running backs. Usually I'd have like a nugget for you there. But they have 4 running backs who touched the ball last week. And it wasn't like they were, in a blowout, but they've had 4 running backs that touched the ball, plus their quarterback carried the ball a lot. So that was big. And they had 61 rushes on 24 carries against Iowa. So Iowa's run defense is really stout, but Rutgers has not been great running the football. That's kind of where they hang their hat, but you play a decent run defense and boom, it's shut down. It's over. Some big games to watch this weekend in the early window. You got number 4, Michigan at Iowa. Last week was a test for Michigan against a team that had an explosive offense and a much improved defense. This week, it's going to be Iowa. Can they stop Michigan's offense? It'll be a challenge for the Wolverines to move the football against a very good Iowa defense. Now, can Iowa score any points? Probably not, unless they're pick sixes or special teams. But it'll be a challenge to that Michigan State offense. So we'll get to, or Michigan offense. We'll learn a little bit more about Michigan this week as they play a very, very stout defense. SEC matchup, also early. Kentucky at Ole Miss. Mark Stoops taking Kentucky, ranked 7th, over to Ole Miss. And Lane Kiffin, there's no Matt Corral. Ole Miss has been pounding the football, running a lot more, 250 yards this year per game on the ground. UK, they're getting Rodriguez back. They've got a very stout line. They'll be in a good shape. I think UK ultimately wins that game, but they are dogs on the road to Ole Miss. Purdue and Minnesota. Why is this a big game? It's at Minnesota. Minnesota's ranked 21st. Ohio State needs Minnesota to be a one-loss Big Ten West champ when you get there. You need some juice to be able to make sure you can bolster yourself in the rankings as much as possible. So Minnesota needs to find a way to win out, or maybe just have one loss until they get to Ohio State. I think people are starting to take notice of them. They're a very veteran team. They've got Muhammad Ibrahim back. They've got Tanner Morgan back, guys who you saw play against Ohio State last year. Ibrahim got hurt. He's now back and ready to go. So another big game. You got Bama and Arkansas in the later window. That should be a good one. Love watching Sam Pittman and how his defense rolls. Hopefully they'll keep that game close. They're 17-point dogs, but I like that matchup, and I like Arkansas to keep that thing tighter and inside the number. And then lastly, the nightcap, the one that everybody's going to enjoy. Hopefully they'll be able to play this game, and the Hurricane Ian will cooperate. But 10 NC State goes into Death Valley to take on Clemson, who's 5th ranked. It'd probably benefit Ohio State for NC State to win. They're not quite as powerful. But if it's pouring down rain, just look for DJU, Mr. Ungule, to be able to just line up and pound the football and run it as much as they ultimately can with him. I think that would be the game plan, should it be a slot fest like we maybe expect. So that's your big game breakdown. That's some of the weekend's best games. I'm going to try to get out a post-game breakdown. I'm going to be in Vegas next week. So I'm going to try to do one from the hotel room. It won't maybe have all the bells and whistles and everything I can normally have on it, because I'll just be on my phone. I'm not bringing all my recording equipment because it's a conference, so I've got to work, and I'm going to try to have some fun. And then obviously watch the games before I get out. I'll try to maybe have it out before I leave. We'll see how it all goes. But just bear with me. There might not be a midweek mailbag either. So got that to look forward to. But please like this, subscribe it, comments, all your questions. I love them. please send them over. That way I can continue to answer your stuff. I love them doing the mailbag. So think up some creative questions, things during the team, especially stuff you want to know about the team and what they're doing. So I can answer that, share it with friends. We continue to grow it. I really appreciate it. And looking forward here to a big weekend of football games and another Buckeye victory. I like the Bucs. Let's say 56-10. See you later.